Hello everyone, and happy Sunday. Welcome to Difficult Conversations. I'm your host, Wilda Black. Today, our panelists will be discussing community leader roles. Are we bridging the gap? You may ask why I chose this topic and what prompted me to choose this topic. When I saw the recent death of our sister Edith Mochama, the question I asked myself was, we have come why have we become so efficient in raising money for the dead, but we are actually not raising money for people who need help when they're still alive? So today I have three phenomenal leaders to discuss this topic. First, I'd like to bring Pastor Dennis Omondi. He is the executive pastor at Opendo Baptist SDA Church. Welcome, Pastor Omondi, to the show.
Thank you.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Welcome to the show. Next, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Rona Sibanda. She is the president of Zawak, Texas chapter, and she has been a community leader back in Africa and also here in America. So welcome, Ms. Sibanda, to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. See, we love you very much. That's why we like you to come to the show so you can give us the wisdom that we need to hear. Next, I have Ian Karaoke. He is the young adult leader also at Upendo Baptist Church. So welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Finally, we'd like to welcome back our moderator, Bianca. Miss Bianca, welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's not evening yet.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
So take it away, Miss Bianca.
Good deal. Good evening, everybody, and everybody watching. And of course, it's quite hot in Texas, but thankfully we're in. The other day it was like 105 degrees, and I thought that was a very illegal kind of temperature, but we'll live. All right. So we're speaking about being community leaders. All of you, three of you, are community leaders. The one who hasn't served in this community the longest, the newest community leader, I think, is Dennis. Dennis happens to be the newbie. So we may garner some wisdom from you, and maybe the things that you've seen that the older of us who've been around for a while have overlooked. All right, so starting right in, you all accepted the call to become community leaders in your own different communities. What factors played in for you accepting to take up the leadership role? And anyone can answer. We're just having a conversation today.
I think I'll go first, Ian. One thing that I observed is lack of mentorship. There's this gap between the old and the young. There's this gap between and when I say the old and the young, I'm talking about parents per se and their children, or even a gap between the older generation and the younger generation. And so that kind of drove me to kind of want to get into leadership, and especially the young adults, because I saw that as one of an area that really needs to be rescued per se in the sense of guidance and mentorship. So I think that's one thing that really drove me into it.
Okay, what about you, Dennis? Were you just, did you find yourself accepting it because you were, as a pastor at Upendo, did you find yourself just in it? But what other extra factors?
No, I think there is different reasons why people get into leadership, especially community leadership. One is just for popularity and love of power and just want to be in the limelight all the time. but then there are other people that actually enter it because of a thirst to see change and to see betterment into the lives of the people. And then there are some people that are thrown in by others that are saying, man, you're saying really good things, but you're not saying them in the right places, you know? So I feel like for me, it was kind of the last two. You know, I have a burden for Kenyan people and African people. And God put this burden in me a long time ago. And I look at Africa and I read a lot about Africa and I look at the things that Africa has to offer. And I look at what is there. I'm like, why can't we be better? And I get into circles where people just talk about it a lot, but don't do anything. And so there are people that are called into shows like this one, and they have really awesome things to say, but not really doing anything about it. So I wanted to be the guy that doesn't only talk about it, but actually does something about it. So that's one of the things that actually made me want to be a leader in the community.
Okay, awesome. So now let's go into the what you guys see as the crucial problems. Let's identify the crucial problems. Of course, the ones that we see in the Kenyan community or African community as a whole. Let's just blanket them all together. Families, domestic violence, immigration issues, raising children, cultural differences because people intermarry, and even outside the cultures, because you guys are called, and then also alcohol and drug dependency. Those are things that come up as crucial problems. Can you guys discuss which ones you think are more than others that are not getting attention, and any that I haven't mentioned as well? Like what is going on in the community? Let's say that, because obviously we know there's a breakdown in communication. There are problems everywhere, and it seems that nothing's being addressed. So let's go.
Go, Ian, go.
Well,
Ian, you deal with a young one, so you should.
yeah. I don't want to sound like I have all the answers, but one thing that I've stood out, because I deal with the young adults with various or different issues. The one approach life, they don't know how to deal with situations, and that tells me that there's no one there to tell them how to go about it. And so me looking at that and having the desire to do so, and actually looking at them from that close vicinity, to me, it's mentorship. I mean, mentorship is passing on how life is supposed to be led on a daily from any perspective, from someone who's experienced life and on an older level, and who has actually succeeded per se to be able to help them out. They are lacking that a lot, and that's why they're doing what they're doing right now. And they are screaming for help because they need that help.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I think in trying to figure out what the problem is, it's very difficult to, you don't really have a one size fit all answer. It's very dependent on who you're talking to, where you're talking. So I just became part of this community maybe in the last 2 or 3 months, the DFW area. So, and it's very interesting because when I came in when it was lockdown. So I haven't really met many people. I've had a lot of Zoom meetings. And so I can't really speak to the specifics of this area, but I can speak generally. Whenever you think about the problem, I think the African person or the Kenyan person, let me just say the African person. And when I say that, I'm really talking about Kenyans, because that's really my experience. Africa is so big, and I'm a Kenyan. and really from Mombasa, so it's just very, very narrow. But just generally speaking, the African person is has had to grow up in this century really quick. A lot of the Western countries, they've had hundreds and hundreds of years to develop into who they are right now. So you have an African person is born in an African context, and they are African. If you cut them, they bleed African. And then they come into Western education. So in the past, they used to be educated by their grandparents, by their aunties, by their uncles, and all that. But now they come from an African home and they go into a Western style school, and they go to primary school, secondary school, and they go to university. And we're exposed a lot of media, movies, and all those things that really shape how we think. But that's a veneer that is on top of an African man or African woman. Underneath that veneer is the African part of him or her. But for him or her to survive in the civilized world, he has to live with that veneer and not really who he is. And so there's a lot of identity crisis in the midst of that. And I think that's the problem. That's where the problem really comes in, where now we begin to judge people or to evaluate people not by who they really are, but by the veneer that they've put on top of them for us to see in order to accept them in our communities. And so when you start defining problems, for me, I think that that's the root of where things begin to really hit the fan.
Yeah, so if then what I'm hearing is that, of course, because there's a culture clash that's very obvious. So then is it up to the leaders to adapt to change? Then they need to adapt to change in order for them to serve their community effectively. Because if you address the problems with on a level of just with the African culture or the Kenyan culture or the Kenyan way of dealing with things, are you really going to be effective if you don't adapt to change?
So and this is the difficult part, I think. And Ian, you better just jump in here because I love talking. So
Go ahead.
Just jump in. But I look at it this way. So we have generations. So we have generations of our father, like my father, who lived in the Kenya that before independence. And then they got independent, they gave birth to us. So we lived in the independent Kenya. And then we have our children who don't even know anything about that history. And you think they'll know it because it's not very far. It's not very long time ago. And then you have their children, people, some of us have children that have children also. And so when you look at that generational gap right there, in the way that we reason about things. So my father, for example, to talk about disciplining a child, it wasn't a culture where I'll sit down with him and talk about my problems. So I was wrong, it was black and white, and I get beat. And that's the end of the story. So there was no conversation really. And then we got children and we wanted to be different from our fathers. So we go to the other extreme. We don't even punish them or discipline them anymore. So they can do whatever they want because now we are reacting to what we didn't like about our upbringing. And then so we are over compensating in that regard. So now we are not talking to our kids, but we are giving them everything they want. So nobody's talking to anyone. So I'm not talking to my parents. I'm not talking to my children. So they're talking to each other. So when they talk to each other, what they are telling each other and what they are telling us is completely different thing. Because we bring them up and we put an image in front of them that we want them to become. And so they learn to live or portray that image that is not really them. And like, I think what Wilda was saying, like the example of Edith, if we may use that example, her friends knew a lot about her. They real her, the struggles that she had. Her family didn't know that. And it's because that gap there does not allow for conversation to happen, real conversation. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay.
Can I
Well,
come
we'll
in?
come. Yes, we'll come back to
I
that.
was
I just
in, I
want.
could hear everything. Yes.
Oh, okay. So,
Maybe,
Mrs. Ibanda, your
yes.
thoughts on the two
Thank you.
questions we
I'll
addressed?
start from where my mind started. You asked the question, why are you in leadership? I want to answer that question because I don't think I got a chance. I since I was around 20, I started working with advocating for the rights of the marginalized people, like the disabled, women in the community who were not. I mean, everyone was treated differently because of maybe of their status or in the community, or their it could be financial, it could be educational, anything else. So without me, people choosing me to say this one, I found myself being an advocate, and and working through as years went by. I think what my fellow panelists say is very true, that we used during then, maybe in Africa, we used to have a setup, a non-setup that we followed, that when I'm growing or when my children are growing, there is this network of leaders, different people. It could be an auntie who is a leader in the family. It could be maybe an uncle who is a leader in something, in another way, who would direct my children or direct me as I was growing. But now there is so much, there are so many forces, there are so many voices, and our children are sometimes, it's very difficult, or the communities that we live in, it's very difficult for me to pick up you and say you are marginalized on this, and I can help you take up this. Because one, maybe you're not even communicating to me. There's so much like complication. You're afraid of coming to me saying, you know what, Mrs. Band, I have a problem with this thing. You think because maybe you are even competing with me without me realizing it. And yet maybe I could even liaise with someone else to help you. So we have so many things, and social media is not even helping us, which is supposed to help us, because we have so many voices around us, and we fail then to build each other as a community, or to carry the community the way we used to carry it back then.
Okay, great. So I'm going to keep on reading the comments from where I think they didn't come here, but these are two important comments that I'm seeing and thoughts, so you guys can jump in and comment about them. There's one here from Pastor Black that says, first generation African immigrants must facilitate the creation and development of support systems for new immigrants and second generation immigrants. And Miss Kimburi Smith, my friend here, who's also a social worker, being for years, says this: to close the generational cultural gaps, we have to include the concepts of acculturation and overall willingness to adapt, not necessarily forsake our upbringing per se.
And
So that middle ground right there.
Bianca, and that is the issue where if you read that statement again, the last part of it, just read the last part again.
The last part, not necessarily forsake our upbringing.
Just before that.
Or before that, to close the generational / cultural gaps, we have to include the concepts of acculturation and overall willingness to adapt.
And that's the thing, is that doesn't happen in a vacuum. People don't just become cultured or accultured by osmosis or diffusion. So you have children who are growing up in a home where their parents are African, and they speak like Africans, they behave like African, but then they live in a country where it's America, and so when they go home, they don't fit, because they can't speak the language, they can't think like their parents. When they go out, they really want to be identified as Africans, but they can't. So they can't fit in the white culture or the African American culture. So they're in this area where you're like, who am I? And I think that is something that people have not really dove deeply into, to try and help these kids to understand who they are. without pegging them or without labeling them American or African, and that's hard. And I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, because most of the time it becomes a corrective measure kind of talk, as opposed to maybe a listening kind of talk. I'm not sure, Ian.
And actually, I was going to jump in. That notion. Let me look at it from my perspective. So I was sent to America when I was 20, and when I left Kenya, the leadership that I left there, the style of leadership was one: if I'm a leader, I'm supposed to be afraid of this person. I'm supposed to fear them. So once you have that fear of that person who is up there, so I don't know how to understand that. Then I'm sent to America with no one to guide me, just mixed up with friends, and then meet a different set of leadership concepts where it's a totally different setting as the one I left in Kenya. So that also confuses me. And so now that I have kids, I don't know how to lead them because I can't understand how to bring what I came in from Africa and what I met in America. So I'm mixed in between. And also the fact that I came here for something else to get a better life. So that also throws the mix in there. So my leadership part to the kids that I have lacks. And so what happens, they either run with the social media or they run with what they see. And so that gap just kind of messes the whole thing up.
I think Ian,
Yes, Mrs.
you are one
Sparks.
of the few who accept that I have a challenge, because of that. And I think we need to hear more from people like you who came when they were young in this country and coming alone without anyone guiding them. How did you manage to still hold on? Because as I see, I haven't met you, but I can tell that you are still connected to where you came from. How did you remain connected? That will help us to actually see the gap and kind of like bring it together. How did you remain connected without anyone guiding you, being young? I think that's the most important. How did you remain connected? And going further, where are you placing your own children? How do they connect with you and also connect with the new environment that you found yourself in? So I think that's a very important point that you are bringing out. That will help us close the gap.
Okay, in this connection, I'm going to combine two thoughts here and a question. Ian, you talked about the leadership style in Africa. Very much so, the leadership style Africa. Mrs. Ibanda, you may tell me if your country is different, but let me speak on Kenya because that's where I'm conversant with. So you can draw the parallels there, Mrs. Ibanda. It looks like when the community leaders, let's speak about Texas. We're here in Texas, so we're going to narrow it down to where we're at. It seems that style of leadership has been carried over here. Meaning, why I say that is you have community leaders who've been community leaders and held those posts for years. And they're not effective. They're tone deaf. They're not effective. They don't do anything. The only time they rear their heads is when there's a death or when there's time to raise funds for something. But when it's crucial for them to be there, before we reach the point when somebody dies, before we reach a point where someone goes and has to be bailed out for immigration, before we reach a point where we know this person has maybe a drug dependency or this person is homeless and stuff like that, they do not work in the first phase of things. We see them show up at the end. So that style of leadership where they carry the leadership roles for years and years without being ousted, if they cannot perform their roles, why don't you include the younger people then? If the older people are tone deaf, why not include more younger people to help you out in leadership roles?
I think it's a disconnect. There's a big disconnect because the way you asked the question, when I came to America, we never had a lot of those leaders. Actually, we had a very few. So we never had those issues. But as they started coming to America, they found a breed, which is us, who had already transitioned to a different setting. So now when they come into America and they start introducing the Kenya we left to us, the bridge becomes bigger and the gap becomes bigger. And so there's that big disconnect because they're trying to impose the Kenyan or the African style of leadership. And I came to America and found out, oh, there's a better way of doing it. And so that disparity right there brings a big vacuum, and that doesn't help the situation.
Okay, anyone else can jump in.
I think there's a few things here. What do we value? The things that we value will determine what we invest our time and money in. And I feel like, and I may be wrong here, Ian and my sister Sibanda, you can correct me, but I feel like as Africans we can be very individualistic. But the thing that is important to me is me, myself, my family, my children. And when I have extra time, then I'm going to go out of that to go help somebody else that needs help. And because of that, most of the time, I don't have time to even care for my own family. So what I do, I give the time that I can give and still look like I'm doing something. So we do what we know how to do well. In Africa, the leaders are not called upon until there's like some kind of a crisis or a celebration, and we put chairs in front. We have the concept of high table. The food that they eat is not even the same as the rest of the people, and so we come into that. So when people that are behind us are watching, they're like, man, I want to be a leader, not to help people, but I want to be a leader so I can sit in front there and eat the good food and drink the cold sodas and all that, you know. And so what we value is not really the helping of people. And I'm speaking really general. I'm sure there's some good people that want to help people, but generally speaking, we value how people perceive us, how people look at us. So you find like right now, I show up in Kenya with my kids. My kids have American accents, and in a weird, screwed up way, that really lifts my status in the community. Now, it's not me, it's my children. They speak American accent because America is big. So now, because I've achieved what I really value and it's look good in front of the community, then what else do I have to add, you know? And talking about the breakdown and the gap and the disconnect. So our children are growing up in this community, in America, DFW, Dallas, Texas, whatever. They are seeing their friends who are American, how they interact with their parents, especially the fathers and the mothers. And they are talking and they're having fun, and the father is involved in everything and the mother is involved in everything. And they come home and they find their father sitting in the living room with his feet up watching television. Because that is what we did. You work so hard to get to a particular place and then you rest. And the children are not really people in the house to be related with. They are trophies to show. And the more you have, the more of a man you are, you know. Mm-hmm. And so this man, we're telling them to do things that really for them is not of value. And so I like what you said, Bianca, about bringing in young people. Now, the problem with that is the old people are holding on to power because they know if the young people come in, they're going to be kicked out. And the old people are keeping these young men. They know that one day they're going to take over. They know that. But they're holding on for as long as they can for the benefits that whatever benefit they're getting from that. And so instead of doing what Ian was saying, mentoring the young people to take over the community, what they're doing is they say, like Joshua said in the Bible, as for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord. That is not, by the way, If you have that sign in your house, remove it, because that sign is not a good sign. It's a sign of a leader abandoning his responsibility. When Moses left Joshua to lead the people of Israel, Moses did his part. Joshua got tired, and man, these people are not easy to lead. I'm telling you. I'll tell you what. I've been here for 2 months. Kenyans in America are not easy to lead. I can tell you that. They have their own brain. They have their own mouth. They think on their own. So you don't tell them what to think. They tell you what they're thinking. You know. So Joshua got tired. You know what Joshua said? Joshua said, "You today choose whatever you want to worship. Whatever, if you want to worship the gods of the land, if you want to, whatever you want to worship, choose who you will worship. But as for me and my family, I will worship the Lord." Now, most of us love that verse because we haven't seen what happened after that verse. If you go in the book of Judges, chapter 1, verse 10, and you see what happened because of what Joshua did, in that time, they say that there was no king in Israel, and everybody did what they want in their own sight. And you see, the children of Israel went into bondage again. They were rescued from bondage, and they ended up in bondage because their leaders absconded their duties. It was hard, so they abandoned it, and they built their own homes and their own businesses and their own families. And for me, I say, if you've gotten there, it is time for you to step down. Don't be a leader. Let the people who want to lead the people into the promised land take over. Because we don't want Joshua's anymore. We want people that are going to lead Africans to achieve what we know that Africans can achieve when they come together. I feel like saying amen right now, but I won't.
Amen. Amen. We'll say that. Yes, Mrs. Sibanda.
Thank you, my brother, for bringing. It's like you were reading my notes when I was writing. I was busy writing notes when someone was talking. I wanted to say there are two sides of this story. You know, we have leaders that will respond well, not like maybe Joshua, that statement, who are there, who make themselves available. But we have a community that has said, no, we don't want a leader. We can do things. We have enough resources. We have enough information, that individualistic, being me, myself, and I. I'm okay. I'm content. I have a job. I have a profession. I have everything. I don't need anything from anyone. And you even raise your children to be, you think you are independent. But on the same side, we might have leaders who fail to be humble when they've succeeded. When you succeed, you fail to be humble, or you don't have confidence during setbacks. That's what you're saying. When you have those setbacks, because when you are leading people, definitely there will be some setbacks. And some people, we don't have the stamina to stand those setbacks when people maybe rise up, maybe question, even question you as a leader. Sometimes you may fail to have that confidence to stand up for what you believe in, or to stand back when, so that others can step up, to stand back so that others can step up. That's when we are bringing in the young people. Am I a leader for life? Am I a Mugabe? Or I'm a leader who is mentoring other people to come in, so that when their time also comes in, I can step back. And you know what? When I'm stepping back, I thank God for everything. And then now when I'm working with them, I'm nurturing them. They can come back to me and say, how do you do this in secret? And I'll give them the strategy in secret, and not go back and say, you know what, I'm the one who told them to do this. No. I'm actually leading from behind. Sometimes we might fail to do that. And putting plans into action. Sometimes we have so many plans, but we fail to put things into action. So if you have a plan and it's not in action, there's nothing, that you have done to follow through with our plans. Sometimes as leaders, we can fail to do that. Or as a community, even if the leader has led us and introduced these strategies, we might fail to actually follow because we have our own agendas. So those are the challenges that we might meet from both sides.
Yeah, and there's yes.
Look, I was just going to add, my understanding of the word leader is, and it's actually something that the greatest leader who ever lived displayed or showed us, Jesus Christ, is to serve. we are out there. We, as a leader, you're out there to serve. But the leadership that
It's a
we have,
calling.
or the leadership that we have nowadays, is the one that they just want to speak and tell us what to do, and they don't want to show us how to go about to do it. And if you look at Jesus Christ, he had a mission when he came to this world. He came to die for everyone. But before he died, the first thing that he did is he discipled for 3.5 years. And discipling is actually mentoring. So I believe that if he can demonstrate that as the greatest leader who ever lived, then people need to understand that leadership is not where you just stand up and say something or lead by talking. It's leading by example.
All right. And someone here has said, Ms. Kimberly Smith again has said that leaders are more reactionary rather than proactive. So hopefully that changes. So, and we've spoken about leaders leading by example. As you talk, your discipleship, right? You're supposed to lead by example. Do you really feel like the community leaders are leading by example? And if not, you as leaders who are there, what can you do? Because if there's a community leader who is not leading by example and they still retain their seat to lead other people, and clearly they're not leading by example by either their actions that we see or actions that we hear, how does that person then, because then it now becomes self-serving, because if they can still be retained to lead others and they're not leading by example, what measures should be taken? Because then the young people start to doubt your system of doing things.
Yeah.
And they have no confidence really in the way the things are done.
I think.
Who's the example?
Oh, go ahead.
The leaders. Because
No,
sometimes leaders fail
if
even
we-
in
if
public.
I mean, I want us to define when we're saying leaders not leading by example. Who gives, what example? What are the standards? Because sometimes the example that you might expect, the expectation that we might have on the leader, it might be different to them. They are doing the correct thing according to what they know, according to what they've been doing, not realizing that they're in this new environment where things have changed. So to that new generation, it's no longer the example that they are expecting.
All right, when I'm speaking about examples, I can be specific. Morally, if your leader is morally bankrupt,
Okay.
I will say that. And we've seen things that are morally bankrupt that they've done. Why do they retain that? We have a lot of leaders. Let me speak about the Kenyan community. I'm not sure about you, Ms. Sibanda's community, but if it happens,
We are
about the same.
man.
There are leaders in the community who embezzle money, but they're still retained in those seats. They're still embezzling money that's supposed to be helping others. There are those leaders, number 3, who employ people and do not pay people. You know that very well. We know because there are people in the community, of course, because of situations with their paperwork and stuff like that, or maybe they're looking for jobs or between jobs, or mostly you want to work with an African because we love to build each other. But the same community leaders who speak are the same people who are, in Kiswahili, we call it kunyanyasa. They're holding, Mrs. Banda, it means holding people by the neck. In terms of not paying people, misusing people, and just misusing the community as a whole. That's what I meant by them leading by example. How do we address that?
So let me jump in here and say
because they're still held up here as community leaders. They're still adored.
So someone said those who have power don't have ideas, and those who have ideas don't have power. So it's you are told that you're the leader of tomorrow. How many of you grew up being told that tomorrow never comes?
Yeah,
we're still reading those books.
I'm still waiting for tomorrow, and so it's and I think that's the idea of having an opposition party in politics if you go into politics. But in Africa, there's no opposition. The opposition, they are so poor, the government just exploits them. So they end up being part of the government, and they both now exploit their people. And so you live in a culture where from the grassroots all the way to the top of the country, everybody's an exploiter. The mama that sells tomatoes on the road, they put 3 tomatoes and a bad one in there. You pay your money, and they've exploited you. And she's the one that is crying, the government is corrupt. So we stop to see our own corruption, and our eyes, it's easy for me to look at the problem of another person. And the Bible says that remove the speck at the log in your eye before you see the speck in somebody else's eye. So I'm going to be the devil's advocate here and say this. We are blaming the leaders, but we are the same people that empower them. That when they call us for meetings, we go there. What happens when one day a leader say, I'm calling for a meeting, and then we don't show up? And then we say, why are you not showing up? Because we don't believe in what you're doing. You are exploiting us. But if we are the people that say, and this is the African person has been muzzled for so long, but now they've been given a voice and they've become expert talkers, and they don't do anything about what they're talking about. So you go to a company, for example, in Africa, and that company, they write good mission and vision statements. I'm sure if you go to the diaspora mission and vision statement, you're going to be like, man, I want to be part of this thing. But once we write those things, we put them on the wall, and they look very good on the wall. They become decorations that we don't do anything about. And we stand up. If Bianca Dennis is the leader, and I call you to come and speak, the first thing you're going to say, thank you, Dennis. You're a wonderful leader. And you know I'm not. And everybody else knows I'm not. But they clap their hands in applause. So these leaders, either they don't know that they're that bad because we are the one that tells them they're good, or they know they are good, but they're like, man, I'm going to sit here as long as they praise me. And so like you said, I think it is high time that we begin to empower the young people. Need to empower themselves and be ready, because they are going to be leaders. These guys, by God's grace, nobody lives forever. So these people are going to die, and that gap is gonna open up. When that space opens up, that needs leadership. Are the young people, honestly, ready today to take leadership? If let's say a miracle happens and these old people say, okay, we've had enough, we're letting you lead. Are we ready to take those positions? And we have to have really honest conversations, because if we're not careful, we may find ourselves experts in criticizing leadership without really offering tangible solutions. To what the problems are. Number one, the problem of talking about leadership in negative ways is it prevents us from really seeing what the real problems are. So I want to have a conversation with these young people, these old people, have a baraz, a meeting, and say, what are our problems as Africans living in the diaspora? And then we name them. And then we say, what have you guys done to address these problems? Yes, we've done this and this and this, but you haven't done enough. So you need help. And the young people offer themselves. Then they are refused. They're told, we don't want you. Then at that point, Ian and I will go and start opposition party. And you'll see all the young people coming to us. And that's what needs to happen. We need to be aggressive, not only in talking about things, but in also becoming part of the solution in solving those problems.
And the leaders are good because they can mentor others since they've been there previously. But I think like what you're saying about the communication of, I don't think we have enough town halls. A lot of you have your homeowners associations, you go to your city councils, and we're very active in those groups. Why then do you think, Mrs. Sibanda, we should have more of those kind of town hall meetings, maybe twice a month or something, and that way people can discuss their issues and bring them?
Yeah, that's a very important point. You guys, it could be town hall meetings, it could be programs within the church. You guys are even better because you are organized as Kenyans. You have your big churches as Kenya. As Zimbabweans, every Zimbabwean who come from Zimbabwe, so there were maybe preacher or a pastor or something back home, in order for them to come and sit under someone, they cannot, so they have to start something, or they would rather go to a white church, because they cannot, be content in that place. So how do we then plan some programs like this where we can come down and sit together? Where do we see each other? Then maybe we can have those town hall meetings. But how many will come? Again, the question of me being content, I have everything, I don't need anything. A town hall meeting maybe is for other people who are lacking in something. We are becoming so confused, and I don't know. God have mercy. In order for us to be helped, we really need, like, pastors and leaders. I mean, we're not talking about bosses, because there's a difference between a boss and a leader. A leader is someone, I believe it's an anointment, it's a calling, and once you have responded to that calling, you will take whatever it is. Whether people throw something on you, you won't turn your back and say, I'm not doing this anymore, because it's a calling. So my prayer is that maybe it needs prayers, it needs maybe leaders coming together and re-strategizing what we do. Let's forget being Kenyan or being Zimbabwean. We are all Africans. Let's come together and say, what do we do? And then how do we work? What programs can we come up with within our communities in order for us to be able to help each other?
But Rona, do we have structures in place where we can call the leaders when we need them? Or someone has to die for these leaders to actually show up?
No, we have.
Where are they? Who are they? And are they accessible? You call them a meeting, will they come?
But also, I wanted to add something. I think we also need to step back a little bit and kind of ask ourselves what this notion of leadership is. Who is a leader and who are the led? Because when we decide to have town meetings, and we're having town meetings where the leaders don't know what they're supposed to be, or they don't know the description of what the leadership is, and the led don't know what they need to do, then what ends up coming out is confusion. And so we'll go there, we'll shout at each other and go out, and we have a town meeting, and that's exactly what goes on. If today leaders call a meeting, this side will shout, the leader will shout, and we'll meet next time, and the same thing will go on. I think the leaders need to understand what is leadership, what is a leader entailed to do, and then what are the led, and what are the led entailed to do. And once there's that understanding, then we can now move forward and start saying, let's have town meetings with that understanding. Otherwise, the ladder is just going to keep on going on and on.
Okay, I'm going to read a few sentiments here, and you guys can, I'll just run down a few sentiments that we may have skipped. And of course, Mrs. Sibanda, you talked about, which was someone else commented here about the difference between a boss and a leader. A boss comes with a title, but the leader is backed up by his actions. That's from Sydney. Now, as Pastor Mondi was talking about, the younger people then need to bring themselves in the forefront. But Mr. Collins here says that the problem is that most of the older generation don't seem to like the younger generation. They don't seem to think that the younger generation can offer any kind of help. That's a sentiment.
I think is the best word to use is they don't understand. They don't understand the younger generation. There's that lack of understanding. And the lack of understanding comes from the confusion of the fact that maybe this young person or this young adult already knows what leadership entails. But the guy who's leading does not understand. He's come with his old-fashioned leadership style. And so there's going to be a clash in between there. And so when the young one looks at the old one, there's not going to be any understanding. And I think, as I said, it's the understanding of both levels. If both of them understand what it entails and what they have, especially the leaders, because I believe wholeheartedly that leaders do not understand what leadership is. And to me, leadership is mentoring. The leadership is you showing what needs to be done, and then preparing them so that when they step aside, the young people can take over and move forward. But today we don't have that. And so you find that when the young adults look at the leaders, they're like, I'm not understanding what is happening there because I'm seeing something that I don't know or understand.
And it's someone else says here, Miss Kira says, that calls for a level of personal responsibility and choice that as individuals we are hesitating to employ. We as individuals do not want to stand out as defying the leadership that's in place already. So I'm going to give you this. Let me tell you something. Let me give you some positive numbers here, and I just want you to think about them because I've just calculated them here in my head. I may be wrong. If somebody wants to to correct me, I may be wrong. But you're going to see how effective these leaders are when it comes to churning out numbers. I want to give you some numbers here. Think about them. We're talking about a 12-month period, a year. In a year, at an average of $33,000, we bail people out for immigration. So I'm going to say maybe we have about 7 or 8 cases, all right, in an average, or a case a month. Let's put it that. So that's $396,000 in a year. That's for immigration issues, which have come up from maybe school status, work status, things like that. When it comes to weddings, on an average of $30,000 shelled out to every couple, on an average of 7 in a year. Some people get 54 grand above, but I'm averaging it at 30,000. That's $210,000 for weddings. When it comes to death, we're talking about an average of each month. We're raising an average of $34,000. That's in a year. That's $720,000. So we're talking about $2.2 million that we shell out each year. And I'm going to back up a question here that says how we organize willingly and deliberately. Professor Goki asked this, how we organize willingly and deliberately. Are there deliberate structures that are democratic? We seem to be organized around calamities. So coming to my numbers here, $2.25 million that we shell out every year because leadership garners everybody together, and here we are collecting money. When this $2.25 million, probably half of it could have been avoided if the issues had been addressed earlier on. Over to you. And also discuss that question that just came in.
Sometimes we cannot avoid death. You know, death will come, and we react towards death according to our background. I mean, you know, back home, even where they don't have money, there is death. People will come in with a small bucket or small plate with some cornmeal and leave it there. That's the corn. We are used to contributing something when someone has died. Maybe that's why. And there are a number of things that cause death, and we can never ignore that. And that's why, to me, it's not a surprise that death comes up high. I mean, in contribution more than anything else. Other things, it could be because people are not coming out. You know, we don't know what is happening. But death, no one, just one person announcing so and so has lost. So the message will spread like fire, like wildfire immediately. You know, it's like that. But when I'm going through a situation that needs finances, it also depends upon me. I'll go maybe to the people that I trust mostly, and those are the ones that are going to help me. I might not want everybody in the community to know that I'm going through this. Even if the people would come, if they were told, people would come, chip in and help. So to me, that's why we have death with, you know, a figure that is up there, because everybody would want to participate when it's death, and we can't control that.
Okay, and as you guys are answering these other questions, just talk about what Mr. Sibanda said about trust. Maybe someone doesn't want to tell their problems. The leaders are all there, supposed to be there as bridging the gap. So we're supposed to be able to trust that the leaders will hold everything in confidence and still effect some kind of change or effect some kind of solution. Is it happening as you continue?
I think jump in there and talk about, and I don't know anything about secular community leaders. I've grown up in church. I've been a pastor all my life, and a missionary, a minister, whatever you want to call me.
in here, I know you've only been here for about 2 months, but here they cohesively work together when things happen. So
Yeah,
they all come together.
yeah,
So
and
I don't
so
think there's a really demarcation
oh,
between the
good.
two.
That's a positive actually, you
Yeah.
know. And so I think there is need to then sit down and rethink, why are we congregating together? What is our goal of having a community? And Kenyans, we are a hard people, man. Like, you have a country with over 45 million people, over 42 tribes, that you get them out of their country and you bring them in another country where everybody else is solidifying against their national identity. You find that there is all these little clubs called chama for different tribal people. And so somebody will say, I'm not going to get involved in this community because I have my tribal community over here. If something happens to me, they'll take care of me. And so it is very selfish and self-serving, because I'm not getting in that community to help the community. I'm getting the community for the community to help me. And when everybody comes that mentality, it's a roadblock for development, because nobody is coming to give. And if they give, they're giving selfishly, because they know I'm giving because, Bianca, I'll come to your wedding, not because I like you, but because I want you, when I'm getting married, I want you to come to my wedding also. Or I'm giving money to your funeral or whatever, or sickness, not because I like you or I know you or I care about you. Just I want my name to be there. And we have that thing of saying, Ian, $2,000, so and so $100. And they're doing that. So I say, hey, man, this guy, whenever he goes to this Arambez, he always gives so much money. So when it comes to his turn, and by the way, unfortunately, it really shows. The people who are really active in all these things, whenever something happens to them, everybody shows up. And the ones that are in the margin that nobody knows, unless you know someone who knows someone who knows someone, you're going to die alone. And so, again, it comes to that point where the existing leadership needs to lead. And in leading, I mean, let's go and call a meeting and redefine how we do community. Now, the idea of young people versus older people, you have to realize that this generational gap is informed by the upbringing of these people who, when they grew up, they didn't question leaders. And so when the leader says, jump, they don't say why, they say how high. But now they are leading people who don't think that way. When you tell them jump, they ask you why. And because they haven't really sat down to think about the why of doing whatever they're doing, they don't have an answer. So what is their answer? Their answer is to demonize the young people. And so because the young people have been demonized for so long, they become the demons that we've labeled them to be in our eyes. So they don't want anything to do with us. We don't want anything to do with them. And when they die, we go to them because their father was part of the community, not because of them. And some of us will even say, hey, thank you, man. That boy was God took him because he was a stumbling block to what we're trying to do. And so before we understand these things, and it is us who have to tell the leaders to begin to talk about the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? So that when the people that are leading ask that question, why, they don't get angry because they already have an answer. We are meeting because blank, blank, blank. And that is one thing that I don't think the African older leaders have invested time in talking about them. So like I become a leader, I hire someone who knows how to write things, they write it for me, and then I go and just parrot what they've written because that's what everybody wants to hear, but I don't believe squat of what I've just said. And that's not going to take us anywhere.
Also, I wanted
Personal
to add
belief, yes.
Yeah. I also want to add the leadership that we have today that deals with this disparities of giving this and giving that, as the Pastor Omondi says, is this people that don't understand the word no. They don't know what no means. I mean, if you tell them no, that's something else. Like, for example, I started my leadership portion with the youth, and as I did youth for 7 years and transitioned to the young adults, I came to understand one thing, that these kids they want to learn, they want to know, they want to understand, they're craving, they want to know everything, but we're not giving them that opportunity, because if things don't go the way of that leader, then it's not going to happen. Because I'm a leader, I'm expected to be followed. If I say, that goes. And so that disparity also kind of boils everything down to this problem that we're having. The word that I want to say is no. If you tell them no, that word no doesn't work with them.
All right. Well, we've kind of run out of time, but I believe here, yes. Dennis, you can say something else before we close out here, but I know there is a part 2, but go ahead and give us your thought here.
I think we need it.
Yes, today we scratched the surface. We kind of just gave an intro. Yeah. So Dennis, you can say your
Yeah, it would be nice if you can bring some of those leaders here so we can talk with them.
All right. So I think we need both sides. We need some representatives. Okay, young people, you're all here on Facebook. You're on chat here. I can see you guys during this week. Let's try and reach out, and you young guys too, my people, my folks. Come on, you want to come here and let's air out our views and what we feel is lacking, because we love to be part of the community. Like Ian says, the young people, we love to be part of the community. We want to help, but we would like that communication to be open, transparent, and good, and just to have a good symbiotic relationship. So let's see here. Yes, leaders also to come in, as well as leaders. We need you here so you can address, because maybe there are things that you're facing opposition from us when you're trying to lead us as well.
So the thing I wanted to say is this: what we value and what we celebrate, people aspire to become. And so when we value funerals, and when we value weddings, and when we value immigration stuff, that's what people are going to aspire to, because that's what success looks like. I raised this much money to bail someone out of a immigration case. I raised this much money to get someone a wedding or a funeral. And so we need to redefine what we value and what to celebrate. And if we value dead people, guess what? We're going to celebrate them, and that's what we're going to invest in. If we value living people, then we're going to invest in living people. And so, like you said, this is an onion. You keep on peeling it, and there's no end to it. And so I think we need to come back and bring in some of these leaders, and I'd love to meet with them.
Great. There's an open call. We have an open casting call. All the characters need to show up next week.
Yep.
And then hopefully we can answer Pastor Black's question here, which is what defines a community leader. Hopefully we'll find and let's map a way forward. There's always time for a new beginning. I don't think all hope is lost. And to be honest, we can't live without each other. That's one thing, because we're in a foreign land. I don't care whether you put your oath up, like I always say. I don't care when you put your oath up and became a citizen or gotcha, whatever. We are all on equal playing field, because today you may have a problem, tomorrow it might be you. Life happens, and we all have to be prepared together, because we always keep on holding this mantle of Ubuntu, but I wish we could really practice the being one as a village together. All right. Thank you so much, Miss Wilda Black, for another chance to do this. And I am so looking forward to next week. And you all have a blessed week. And I think you all have a lot of time in your hands to make phone calls. Everybody's at home.
Thank you.
So we can make those computers work and phone calls. Thank you so much, Miss Ibanda, as always. Ian, as always, nice to see you. And Pastor Mondi, who is the newbie in the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Miss Wilda.
Bye-bye.
Over to you, Miss Wilda.
Thank you. That was a very good discussion. So we'll see you guys next week as we talk more about the community leaders, and we will bring some of the community leaders to talk about this discussion, and our young people too. So until next week, I will see you then. Bye.